Well, this morning we are going to again look into Ecclesiastes. And there's something that I think is really important when we recognize looking at God's Word, especially Ecclesiastes. It's one of the books of the Bible that is actually thought-provoking, and it's full of content which actually assists anyone who is searching for significance in life. We don't have to go too far. We can go to God's Word when we need to understand some things and understand His purposes. That's why His Word is available to us. And you know, so many people are looking for significant purpose in life, correct? All around. And it's really, we understand that the best source in finding purpose is to go directly to God and to His Word. There are all kinds of other options out there. But what they do is they keep people lost in the wind. I concur a lot like Solomon, especially as I'm growing older. Apart from God, life is rather meaningless. Really, it's life, the purpose of life. If you take God out of the picture, it is so meaningless. Now, I do admit this completely. I understand that there's others out there that do not hold that same faith worldview. I understand that. I'm not oblivious. In fact, there are people who, they completely dismiss God, His existence, the teachings of the Bible, and we find that happening all around us. Well, one thing that I would like to remind everybody in the mix of this, aren't you thankful that we can exercise the freedoms that we have? We don't live in a country where you're told you cannot believe in God. We kind of start wondering what's happening around us, but we should be thankful and grateful that we have this opportunity to worship God, to gather together to worship Him, and to look to His Word. Universally, I said this at the beginning of this series, people look for fulfillment and purpose. It's been happening for generation after generation. But we do understand this. As Christians, our foundation rests where? It rests on the very sovereignty of God and the very truth of His Word. If God's Word is not true, that eliminates a strong foundation. We were worshiping this morning, strong tower, the same kind of principles. As a Christian, we run to God because He gives us significance and purpose. Well, this morning, I've titled this message, A Boat and the Wind. I've done that for an important reason and to express some different thoughts with you. Now, I'm going to admit my boating experiences are quite limited. There are some of you here that you've sailed the high seas and you've done all kinds of different things. My boating experience has been limited to that of a kayak, maybe a small boat or a raft or a canoe. And that's about it. I am more of a landlubber, and I proudly admit that. I've never had the opportunity of being on a sailing boat. Anybody on a sailing boat? Where the wind takes you, right? I've never had that privilege or that experience. I've barely been, I think I was on one what do you call it, where you put the car on? Ferry. You know, yeah. See, I'm a landlubber, Sandy. People that live out in the Northwest, they understand ferries left and right. That's how they get everywhere, that and plane. Well, although I have spent little time on the ocean, I understand, and even with little watercraft knowledge, I can gather the significance and the effects of the wind. The wind is powerful, isn't it? And the powerful force of nature, do you know what's interesting about it? It can be both useful and it can be destructive. Correct? Especially when it comes to sailing. It's useful. Why? Because it takes you places. Sometimes it may take you to places you don't want to go. And As a child, I reminisce in my age. It's probably because all the gray hair coming in. But one time I recall being on a fishing trip on a very small reservoir in the Pintler Range. That would be southwest of Georgetown Lake out by Anaconda, between there and Peaburg, your stomping grounds. I don't remember the name of the little drainage we were on. My grandfather and my father, they often took me on fishing trips. And I really enjoyed those as a child. I don't necessarily know if they enjoyed all those experiences, because I annoyed them because I rocked the boat. And that made the older people nervous. Trust me, I didn't really care. You know, I was just having a good time. Sometimes, well, I've got snags all the time, so I was always asking for help. Anybody that's taken someone young fishing, you know that's what happens. And I have one usual question. How do you tie that hook on again? I ask that question all the time because I needed help as a kid to do that. And part of the reason I had to tie the hook on is because I kept snagging things and losing. Well, I remember that afternoon on that reservoir, and in the beautiful mountains, all of a sudden, a storm rolled over those mountains. In the matter of minutes, it turned dark. Unfortunately, we were on the far end of the reservoir from where the dock was. And all of a sudden, rain and hail, it hit our little boat like a ferocious storm does. I can remember Grandpa starting up that little motor, because it was a little one, and that thing would barely push us across that lake because the wind and the waves, and as we were skirting along, and in those conditions. Thankfully, we did make it to the other side. The story doesn't, end with us all in the water. Yeah. We were soaking wet. I think I recall bailing some water out as we go across it. How many have ever had that experience, being on the water, where the wind and the rain comes pouring in? Is it a fun experience? Sometimes. You're a little unique there, Lily. I think most people don't consider those things fun. Well, I say all of that as we are looking at Ecclesiastes for an important reason, and it helps to illustrate something. Emotions, too, can be quite tumultuous like a storm. Do you hear me? Do you understand that? Our emotions, they can be like a storm. All of us, and every one of us is like this. We all experience emotions. We deal with uncontrollable hardships of life. We like the joyful experiences of life that bring emotion. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female alike. We're all in the same, if I could use a phrase, boat. We're all in the same boat. Well, you notice something here in Ecclesiastes 3. Solomon, he brings this to our attention. Verse 1, we know there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the sun. If you drop down to verse 4, our focus verse today, there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. I want to look at that with you just for a few moments today. I want to take a few moments of your time as we look at what it means to navigate emotions from a biblical perspective. The truth is, all of us experience emotions. What we want to garner here is gaining some biblical perspective in this manner. So I will admit this. This message won't cover all the bases, nor is it intended to, and I'm sorry I won't be able to give you the perfect answers for every situation that you experience in navigating emotion. The truth is, all of us go through that. I do want to be sensitive to people, to all of us and others, as we wrestle with emotions. But again, the key word is navigating. We're all navigating. We're all on a journey. And so I got just a couple points with you today. Number one is, we must understand that God gave us emotions. Let's start right from the framework here. God gave us emotions. He created us with emotions, and He created us to have emotional responses. Emotions aren't necessarily wrong. They're not. Being that God wired us with these emotions, that can be reassuring news. Solomon, what he's doing here, as we see in Ecclesiastes 3, he's stating these different pairings. And you'll notice all these pairings, they are opposing. They're opposites. A time to weep, a time to laugh. A time to mourn, a time to dance. There's something I want you to keep in mind. We need to be careful in placing our emotions on the same spectrum as what is good and bad, or good and evil. We want to be careful in doing so. If we condition our emotions on a level of good versus evil, the results will be confusing. The truth is, remember, God created us with emotion. That doesn't mean that it's bad or evil or wrong. There are a lot of different viewpoints out there on some of this. But why in the world would God give us emotions if they weren't for a purpose? And they do serve a purpose. I was thinking here in Romans 12, the Bible says this in verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. You see the two opposing emotions there? See, our emotions, they serve a purpose in specific moments in life. We mourn or grieve after the death of a loved one. We do that. We cry in moments of pain or tragedy. We laugh on happy occasions. We laugh when we see the funny antics of somebody, and it just brings the joy to our heart. Some people even dance on celebrating different events. I'm just not much of a dancer. My dance is pretty little. That's just kind of how I am. But people dance celebrating something, right? Emotions, they are healthy and they are appropriate. The timing is what's key to it. And I think we need to really be careful. You don't want to... I can remember growing up around some where they would teach their young children, especially boys, you don't cry. You don't cry. You fall down, you rub dirt on it, you get over it. You don't cry. We have to be careful, because if we condition ourselves never to experience the emotions that God has created with, it kind of tampers down and confuses a person. Now, I want to explore this a little bit with you. Have you ever noticed or seen people cry and laugh? Yeah. Yeah. You ever find yourself crying at a time when you're like, why am I crying? It isn't necessarily painful. I love some people, they cry so much, then they turn to laughing. I should be careful. I'm getting pointed at, but sometimes I laugh in that moment too. Sometimes even, and I've seen this in recent days, have you ever seen somebody cry and then laugh even at a funeral? See, the timing is important. It's really important. Or somebody who celebrates because their loved one is no longer in physical pain. They're in the presence of Jesus. And it brings emotions of mourning, but sometimes joy. Many of us have experienced that. They're all appropriate times. Every one of them. There is a season and a purpose for all of that. Now, on the other hand, there are times when expressing a certain emotion, it could be seen as what? Disrespectful or hurtful. I'll give you a couple examples. We don't see people generally celebrate when somebody gets a cancer diagnosis. Correct? That would be not really in time. It's not appropriate. What are some other examples where you see something where it would be inappropriate? What do you think?
Jeff used to throw gallon jars down a set of stairs to hear them crash and then cackle. That was not.
That was not appropriate. There was a time for correction there, wasn't there?
It went a long time.
It went a long time. And he must have been doing that to get some emotion too, huh?
No, there was a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or he was struggling with his emotion. I mean, we see people that can struggle at times with their emotion.
I think it got me to do something,
Mm-hmm.
and it was effective.
Yeah, very effective. Other times when it's not maybe appropriate. And I know some of these are a little more gray, aren't they? Anything come to mind? To laugh at them in a way that isn't respectful of the situation. And see, I think that's why it's interesting, because you can sometimes laugh and cry maybe for somebody who is, I mean, it is a good example. Somebody who has a terrible health diagnosis, you don't celebrate that. That's not, should we dance on somebody's bad condition? No.
When
It's
someone
not
gets a divorce, we don't say, that's a great idea, we would like it anyway.
Yeah.
And
That's not appropriate. Even though people will say that out loud, or they'll say it in their heads. Somebody comes into a bad situation, should we just say, yep, they deserve it. Praise God. That's not appropriate. That's not appropriate. Well, there's things that we have to remember, and we have to understand, fundamentally, God gave each of us emotions. It doesn't matter whether we're male or female, our backgrounds, emotions are healthy. Number two, we must also come to understand that emotions are not sinful themselves, in themselves. I think sometimes we might get that out of balance, and emotions can lead to some different things, correct? But they're not sinful in themselves. Our responses can lead to sinful thoughts and actions. It's our response to that emotion. And I know this to be true by looking at the Bible and the example of Jesus. The fact that Jesus dealt with negative emotions, did he not? He did. I'm going to give you some examples. And I use the term in quotes, negative emotions. Because sometimes we think and we equate a negative with evil or wrong. They could be opposing different things, but that doesn't mean they're always wrong. Because Jesus, in fact, he dealt with anger and grief, and he never sinned. And I think that's really revealing. He also navigated those emotions in his life. Just as you and I. He came as God in the flesh, and he experienced the things we experience, but it did not lead him or cause him to sin. And we can learn from his example. One of the shortest, if not, it is the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. John chapter 11, verse 35. He experienced emotion. He wept. Now, why did Jesus weep? Because he was being empathetic for the hurting, for the distraught people. It brought emotion to his heart, and it welled up inside of him, and he had compassion. Jesus was like that. He looked at people, and he had compassion, and he wept. Now, a couple other examples. And I know you know some of these well. Matthew chapter 12. I'll read several verses there with you, starting at 9. This is referring to Jesus. Going from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, this is the Pharisees and Sadducees, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep. Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, he says, stretch out your hand. So he stretched out his hand, and it was completely restored, and just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees, what did they do? They went out and they plotted how they might kill Jesus. Was Jesus angry at them? He was. He was angry because of the religious hypocrisy that was occurring. All of these religious laws and customs, and what were they doing? They were taking precedence over people.
It was frustrating.
Very frustrating. So he had an emotion of frustration and anger, but he responded in the proper manner. And if you think about it, no healing on the Sabbath. Really? Really, why are you making that such an issue? It's because of all the long line of religious customs that became so hardened. And Jesus came, and what did he do? He cared about that man. And any of you that's seen The Chosen recently, the last series, they display that there. It's remarkable. Jesus expressed anger or frustration. Here's another one in Matthew chapter 21. And most of us know this. Jesus entered the temple courts, and he drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. He said, it is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you're making it a den of robbers. Now, was he a little upset? Yeah, he was. He was angry. And he showed great emotion in it. He even got a little excited and tipped some tables over. Kind of drove them out there.
Probably showed great restraint because he had the ability to take care of the situation.
Now, he could have probably done a little more. But what's really interesting is to think about the situation and what was really occurring there. What was happening is the religious leaders and merchants, they were taking advantage of ordinary people that were coming to sacrifice. That's why Jesus was angry. Because they were putting high requirements and purchases on these sacrifices on people who traveled long distance. Remember how they came and they worshipped in that day? They came long distances and they would bring a dove or a sheep or different things in that form of sacrifice. Well, what they were doing, they were charging them money for it, and it was way overpriced. Way overpriced. And all of this is prior to what? The cross of Jesus. But that's why Jesus went around and he said things like what? You must worship God in spirit and truth. Remember when he met the Samaritan woman? And that conversation he had with her? And she was discussing, well, you Jews don't like us because, we don't worship on the same hill and all these. And Jesus said what? There's coming a day when you will worship God in spirit and truth. And then he revealed himself to her as the Messiah. See, Jesus had emotions. He had emotions. Thinking of those verses in Matthew 12, I do admit, I remember a time I recall of a person who was claiming to have religious anger. Now, we need to be careful if we're going to claim to have religious anger, especially and guard our emotions in those moments. And this individual was referring to a table that was set up in a church, and they were selling Christian t-shirts. And this individual was really perturbed by it. He was religiously angry. He said it was righteous anger. And I guarantee you, he did not have a whip, but his attitude was sharp as a whip and nasty as a whip. And I'm really sorry to beg to differ, but that was a wrong interpretation of Scripture. There wasn't selling of merchandise for sacrifices or keeping people from worshiping Jesus. It was just a simple thing of this supports a ministry. That's all. And it was all done willingly. See the difference? The people there, they were required. They were required to do that. And we have to remember, we have to be careful. If we're going to equate righteous anger to anger that harms people in the body, or is divisive, or it causes discord, it's not of God. It's of self. Christ-like emotions, they will always keep us in check as we continually operate in the fruit of the Spirit. Emotions aren't wrong, but we need to also understand, and this is number 3, we understand that our thoughts stir our emotions. I want to talk about that last with you for a moment. And some of you have done some different reading and studies, and there's some pretty remarkable things out there, truthful things. Sometimes in a person's biochemistry, there are matters that play a role in some people that have a greater level of struggle with emotions than others. That happens, and it's scientifically proven. God understands this. But here's the one thing that brings us all together, because we're all in the same boat. God's Word provides us all with the effective tools we need to navigate unhealthy outcomes of our emotions that result from our thoughts. What does Romans tell us? It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, and here's the key, right? But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and prove and what God's will is, his good and perfect, pleasing will. And see, the truth is this. God gives us each the tools that we need, where we daily need to keep our mind renewed. What happens if we don't allow God's Word and the work of His Holy Spirit to renew our mind? Our thoughts will stir and drive our emotions to places where we don't want to be. That's why God's Word is important to us. Why it is valuable. Because otherwise, if we don't have His principles, His principles actually keep us from being swamped by the pervasive negative thoughts that we deal with. It's kind of like being in a boat. And the water is pouring down. The negative thoughts can be some of that. And they will do what? They will swamp the boat and they will overwhelm us. And that's why we need to renew our mind. We have to think of Ephesians chapter 6, where it talks about what? Putting on the full armor of God. If I don't go dressed for the daily situations and I just go at it naked, spiritually I'm in trouble, right? If I don't put on the helmet of salvation, or I don't pick up the sword, all these different things. And see, the Bible tells us all of those avenues, those are actually tools that equip us for our daily life. And you know what? Sometimes we might think that's basic. It is basic and it's foundational, but what does it do? It provides us with the tools we need to navigate the emotions. Because all of us, our thoughts are steered by our emotions. And so our thoughts need to be in those things in Christ. And although that you deal with a disability, God gives you the tools so your mind can be renewed. It's not wrong to have a disability. It's not wrong to have different emotions in our life, right? God created us the way we are. Well, here's what's really important. As each of us navigate these things daily and these emotions in our life, I want to encourage you to try something. Embrace your emotions. Don't disqualify them. If you're going through something difficult, don't disqualify it and push them off. God gave you those emotions for a reason. There's a time and a place and a season for everything. We have to also learn to surrender those emotions to God. The truth is, doesn't He see it all anyway? We're pretty good at hiding things from other people. Any of you ever been there? You don't have to raise your hands. You can hide. I'm raising mine. We are really good at hiding our emotions. Sometimes we might not be good at it, and it causes us or brings us to some other places we don't like. But the truth is, God sees it all. And I wanted to show you and ask you a few questions. I want you to keep these in mind. These are some excellent questions that you can work through in pertaining to emotions. Here's the first one. What is prompting this specific emotion? Identify it. God gave us emotion and how we deal with it, or vice versa, whatever. So as we deal with these emotions, learn to identify them. Don't ignore them, right? Identifying. B, what are the thoughts that are fueling certain emotions? If you're wrestling, or if I wrestle with a lot of negative thoughts about someone or a situation, most likely that's going to be fueling what? Our emotions, and then they can steer us in different ways. Again, the next one is important, as I mentioned. Ask yourself this question: have I renewed those thoughts according to God's Word? If we deal with a negative emotion or negative outcomes because of our emotions, have we turned around and checked and said, God, what does your Word teach me about this situation or this feeling, these emotions I'm going through? Here's another one. Are these emotions consistent with the fruit of the Spirit? Now, if they're opposing to the fruit of the Spirit, we know that we need to deal with those and to put some of that to rest. If they're contrary, they need to be left aside. Another one is, am I allowing the Holy Spirit to guide my emotions? That's a good thing to evaluate. If I have the fruit of the Spirit working in my life, am I allowing the Holy Spirit to guide my emotions? Sometimes we let circumstances guide our emotions. And that's when we start to get overwhelmed. Here's another one. How are my emotions affecting others? Is it positive or negative? Because the truth is, again, we all have emotions. But if my emotions and my responses negatively affect others, I need to go back to the other step. Renewing mind, surrendering to God's Word, surrendering to the work of the Holy Spirit, and so forth. And this ties a little bit to last week. Are my emotional expressions building others up as God desires, or are they harmfully tearing another down? I'm talking about expressions. We deal with the emotion and then how it's expressed. And this is a good one. If my emotions are creating unhealthy responses, how and when will I find help to be more balanced? The truth is, all of us sometimes need somebody else in our life. We're not intended to be lone rangers. Sometimes we need somebody who can professionally and biblically guide us and counsel us through some things. There's nothing wrong with admitting that I need help. There's nothing wrong with that. God made us with the emotions. Sometimes we need some other people who are part of God's plan to be able to help us in those moments. What I'm really saying here is we must be very cognizant if our emotions lead us to unhealthy actions and reactions. If that's the case, circumstances in life, what will they do? They will toss us and they'll throw us like that boat on the wind, on the water. And our emotions will be tossed and pushed in every direction, responding to the different things that we can't always control. Nobody likes to live that way. There are so many people in different mental health situations and difficult times. They don't want to be tossed. They don't want to be battered on time after time. And we need to be cognizant of that. We need to be mindful if we ever get into those positions. I came across something that was really balanced, and I wanted to share that as we close today. This was an author, a writer, Alasdair Rose. He talks about this balance. I want you to see this. Our emotions are neither the most important thing about us, something to be worshipped, nor are they the least important, a problem to be avoided or ignored. See the balance described there? If our emotions are everything about us and our outcomes, and especially if we deal with negative responses to those emotions, if that's everything that drives us, then we're out of balance. But we also can't be on the other side and say, I just ignore it all. I'm a stoic, Norwegian, or whatever excuse we have. I don't feel anything. I don't feel any pain. I'm not going to be guided by emotion at all. All of us are guided by emotion one way or another. Just depends what subject you hit on, right? Or what we're dealing with. Well, the truth is, God created each of us to be emotional. And what's really important is that we always look to Him and His Word for guidance with those emotions. And I agree. I think Solomon hits it right on the head very well. There is a time and a place for those emotions. The key is, may we honor God and may we be honoring of others in that process. Again, chapter 3 spells it out. There's a time and a reason. Sometimes we don't like the time or the reasons behind it, or we wonder, right? But they all serve a purpose. And I want to encourage you, stand in the truth that God created you to be emotional, and understand that there is proper times and places for that, and embrace the emotions that God gives you. They're healthy. May they lead us, and may His Word steer us so that we can properly use those emotions to benefit others and honor Him. Otherwise, we'll be like a boat lost on the water, being tossed around. I'm thankful that Jesus can meet us wherever we're at and the emotions that we wrestle with. So as you go out today and tomorrow and the next day and you're navigating those emotions, look to God and His Word. Allow the Holy Spirit to rest in those situations. He'll do that. God's Word will shape us and mold us. Let's pray. Lord, today we thank You for Your Word, and as Solomon reminds us of this really central truth, is that we all wrestle with emotions. And Lord, I pray that we would be people that would continually look to Your Word. God, that we would practice what the Bible teaches. And if our expressions from these emotions steer us away from Your Word, or they get a hold of us in a way, I pray that we would come back to center. Lord, we would always see the value of practicing the fruit of the Spirit, to have love and joy and peace and patience and kindness. Lord, those are qualities that we admire, and sometimes we need to be reminded to come back to those. Lord, I pray that we wouldn't get lost in this process as we try to find purpose in this life, but we would look to You, and we would find the significance and purpose that You give us, especially when it comes to navigating emotions. We want to honor You and Your Word. We pray these things in Your name. Amen. Amen. God bless you on your journey.